Hello and welcome to FFRF's Ask an Atheist. I'm Annie Laurie Gaylor, co-founder and co-president of the Freedom From Religion Foundation, and I'm in the Stephen Ewell Friendly Atheist Studio in Freethought Hall, which is the headquarters of FFRF in Madison, Wisconsin.
And I'm Mark Dan, Director of Governmental Affairs for FFRF in Washington, D.C.
On today's show, which we're titling Atheist Nebraska State Senator Champion of Abortion Rights, we are honored to have with us Nebraska State Senator Megan Hunt, who's an out and proud atheist and member of the LGBTQ community. She represents Western Omaha in the state legislature. Recently, Senator Hunt led the charge to defeat LB 933, a so-called trigger bill that would have banned all abortions in the state of Nebraska when Roe v. Wade is overturned by the Supreme Court. Senator Hunt has been recognized as a national leader who is protecting access to abortion and health care, and we are delighted to announce that Senator Hunt will be at our annual National Convention in San Antonio this fall, where she'll be receiving FFRF's Champion of the First Amendment Award, which is an award, by the way, that had been given in the past to former State Senator Ernie Chambers in Nebraska, who also called himself a non-superstitionist.
And if you have questions for Senator Hunt, you can ask them in the comments or send an email to askanatheist@ffrf.org. Yes, the show is called Ask an Atheist, but today we have a question for you, our viewers. So when white Christian nationalists are successful in overturning Roe v. Wade, what do you think they're going to attack next? So put your answer in the comments and we might read it on the air, assuming it's family friendly. And remember, FFRF is a 501c3 nonpartisan organization, so we do not and cannot take sides in partisan elections and don't necessarily endorse any such views that might be expressed here. Senator Hunt, we set this interview up a few weeks ago to talk about your work in the legislature, to talk about abortion, and today could not be more timely, so we're always honored to have you. What's your reaction to the leaked decision following the showing that the Supreme Court is ready to overturn Roe v. Wade?
Well, hi, everybody. Thank you for having me on today. When this opinion leaked, I was having coffee with one of my good friends who's visiting from out of town, and we hadn't seen each other in years, and we're catching up, and she's super cool, and we used to work together long time ago, but my phone started blowing up and I looked down at it because normally you don't have your phone on during these types of things. And I'm like, I just need to look at this. And it's just blowing up with notifications and people sharing what's going on with me and texting me. And we were laughing because her phone was all like Met Gala updates. And so we were laughing about like the different algorithms that were on or whatever. But, I've been a part of a collective of people in Nebraska and in this country who have been organizing around abortion justice for decades. And we have known that this was going to come. And while the leak was unexpected, the decision to overturn Wade is not unexpected. And far-right extremists have been intent on eviscerating federal civil rights protections and regressing the country to an era of forced birth for decades. And so the outcome is no surprise to the people who have long been working for abortion justice. But it was still, like a very emotional thing to see.
Well, you told us before the show started, Megan, Senator Hunt, that you've been busy doing a lot of interviews like these, representing basically pro-choice in Nebraska.
Yeah, I mean, from the moment the news came out, my contacts in the press were, calling me and texting me and trying to not only understand what this means for Nebraska. And I know that your audience with this show is not just Nebraska, so I'm not going to keep it specific to that, but everybody has the same question. What does this mean for me? And what does this mean for my friends and family and loved ones and neighbors in my state? Because if we end up making civil rights a states' rights issue, then are they really rights at all? And this is the question that is really behind what everybody's concerned about.
Exactly. When we hear that term states' rights, look out. The classic argument of the segregationists.
Given the likely decision, does this change how you look at the courts and the ability of the courts and the electoral process to deliver justice to Americans?
Well, I have never counted on the courts to save us. I think that when you look at what happened in the last couple of years with the confirmation of justices under President Trump, that was all a mess. It was all a shameful, complete mess. I mean, one thing about Amy Coney Barrett's hearing that bothered me is you remember this letter she signed on to that was like, abortion is murder. We are law professors who believe abortion is murder. And she was asked about it during the hearing. And she was like, oh, yeah, I was on my way out of church and somebody was like, sign this letter. So I did. Like that whole exchange was infuriating. This blithe dismissal as if she just signs any random paper that people put in front of her face. And then the questioner just moved on. As far as I can remember. And it was just horrendous, that hearing. And the same thing with Justice Kavanaugh's hearing. It's unbelievable to me that Kavanaugh is the median voter on the court now, the ideological median. Those ridiculous lies about his yearbook, taunting that girl for being easy and then totally lying about it. Just say that you were a jerk in high school. It's okay. Like a lot of people who went on to do great things made mistakes when they were young. But just the fact that the entire confirmation process has been turned into a joke in this country, yes, it undermines faith in the institution. And I think it's time for Americans to say, maybe we can't rely on these institutions to save us. And it's time for us to join the generations of women, generations of people who have been organizing for our rights instead of looking to the Democratic Party or looking to the courts to save us.
Well, and of course, at FFRF, we are in favor of court reform because of those stolen seats. But we invited you back on Ask an Atheist to talk about how you were able to block a trigger bill that would have banned abortions in the state of Nebraska. It was a very dramatic testimony. And we have that we want to show a clip from the beginning of your speech on the floor of the Senate on April 9th or 6th. You were speaking out against the bill.
Today, Christian religious extremists, let's call it what it is, are trying to pass a forced birth bill in Nebraska to cut off abortion services, including for victims of rape and incest and child abuse, with no exception for the life of the mother.
So when that broke and that kind of went viral, Megan, we had so many of our members contacting us saying, give that woman an award. and that's why we're looking forward to seeing you at our convention in San Antonio at the end of October, where you'll get a champion of the First Amendment Award. But I mean, that was amazing. You spoke truth to power. You talked about the Christian basis of the anti-abortion legislation. So how did that feel?
Well, thank you. I mean, of course, I need to first say, like, none of us do any of this work for awards, right? Like, it's just my job. I was elected by 45,000 people to go down there and represent them and do a job for them. And it's really exciting for me to get to share that passion that I have for reproductive justice and for abortion justice through my work. How did we do it? I mean, so I filibustered that bill. So I really spoke on the floor for hours and hours and hours. It was probably over 6 hours total that I was speaking, but that is kind of the clip that really ended up taking off and a lot of people ended up seeing around the country. It's so procedural, the stuff that we do in the legislature, in this institution. I've kind of been talking about institutions during this time, and the bill was so extreme. It turned doctors who use their best medical judgment into felons. Even if they're charged with a felony, they can lose their medical license. And, there's a rebuttable presumption, and the doctor can go into, can challenge this and go to court and say, well, I did it to save the life of the mother, and they can prove that. I was arguing that doctors don't want to go to court to prove that they're doing their jobs. They just want to be trusted to do their jobs. And I trust women. I trust people who are pregnant, I trust the physicians that we have in Nebraska to use their best judgment for themselves and their families. And as far as calling out the Christian extremism of it, yes, there is definitely a group of people in the far right who want this to be a Christian theocracy. And that's not everybody. I mean, I do believe that people can sincerely hold conservative beliefs without kind of being a part of this, totalitarian religious movement. But this is why we can't pass laws based on biblical morality, because when you look at Judaism, there's no law in Judaism against abortion. There's no law in Islam against abortion. And of course, people come from many faith backgrounds, and we need more of them serving in elected office, because we have allowed not even Christianity writ large, but one very extremist pocket voice in this religion to basically control the lives of all kinds of people who may not hold those beliefs. And so that's really what I stand against. It's not even coming from an atheist perspective or it's not about what religion it is. It's just saying that we can't allow one type of belief to control the lives of everybody who might not share that belief.
Yes, the separation of religion and government. Now, that bill needed 33 votes to pass, and I should explain that Nebraska is a unicameral state. You have just the Senate. And,
that's right.
And it received only 31 thanks to you. So you stopped that bill through the filibuster?
Yeah, so in order to bring a bill to cloture, so normally a bill needs 25 votes to pass. But if we filibuster the bill and we take it to cloture, which is 8 hours on the first round of debate, then it needs 33 votes in order to, break the filibuster and go to a vote. So, I could have seen it going either way. There were a couple people who were unsure about their vote up until the moment they pushed the button, I'm sure. It was a very tense thing. And I know that after the decision about what to do about Roe versus Wade from the Supreme Court comes down, we will likely be convening a special session to try to ban abortion again in Nebraska. So that could be like 2 weeks after the decision. And so we're just going to be back there again doing the same thing.
But it gave us such heart that you were able to defeat that trigger bill when you did it. I mean, it shows it can be done, and we're so grateful.
It wasn't me. It was, I took the time because we needed to take the time in order to solidify those 31 votes and make sure that we could keep a couple people off of it and not let it pass. But honestly, I give credit to those two senators for blocking this bill, because for me, it's an easy vote. And honestly, for me, it's easy to talk for 6 or 8 or 10 hours too. But I know that there are some people in that chamber that took a hard vote that day, and their courage is what saved this at the end of the day. And I thank them for that.
And in your speech, you said that the authors pulled the wrong bill. What were the other bills, and why did the opposition go with the most extreme one?
That's a good question. I mean, there's a lot of sort of strategic theories about that. I don't know. There was one bill that would have put some very restrictive regulations around medication abortion, around mifepristone and misoprostol, which are, it's a medication abortion. And then the other bill was a heartbeat ban. So that one was like, 6-week ban. Right. The bill that ended up being introduced, so those were introduced by 3 people. At the beginning of the session, everybody can bring any bills they want and introduce them. 3 people, unsurprisingly, independently brought some kind of abortion ban bill. And since the committee wasn't going to vote these bills out, the committee did not want to vote any of these bills out. And so they had to use kind of a procedural motion called a poll motion to pull the bills onto the floor without going through the committee process. So that was a fight. Every step of the way was a fight. But I don't know why they ended up pulling the one that was so extreme, because honestly, I was kind of glad they pulled that one, because I was like, if there's any chance of defeating this, it has to be the most wild bananas bill that we have, the one that makes doctors felons. And the bill was so poorly that it inadvertently banned in vitro fertilization treatments, banned contraception, it banned IUDs. So it was a really poorly written bill, and that's probably why we were able to defeat it in the end.
So we're here in Madison, Wisconsin, and when Roe is overturned, as it's inevitably going to be, we have a 1849 anti-abortion bill on the books that does make it a felon for physicians to perform abortions, and we're hoping, we'll see what happens. But to clarify, what's the status right now for Nebraska? Is abortion completely legal? Do you have public funded abortion?
So in Nebraska, under our current law, abortion would remain legal for 20 weeks. And, in Nebraska, we have a 20-week ban, but we have exceptions for life endangerment or severely compromised health. So it's one of actually the more lenient policies in the country, I have to say. And if Roe gets overturned and we don't ban abortion in Nebraska, I can see the state becoming an oasis for people, especially those who are seeking medication abortion, because those can be done very early in pregnancy in the first trimester.
So I think we have some more clips, don't we, Mark? What were you going to introduce?
Yeah. In your floor speech, you had some choice words for some of your colleagues. Let's take a quick listen.
And if I go to the pearly gates and meet your God someday, which sounds great, I hope I do, I don't think I'm going to get in any trouble for killing all of your bills who vote for this. I don't think your God's going to have any problem with that. And I don't think I'm going to see any of you there either. Thank you, Mr. President.
So do you think they got the message?
I think that the threat of killing all of their other bills is probably what got at least one senator to vote no on that bill. But yeah, that was toward the end of debate after about 8 hours and after about 8 hours of me talking. And, it just reflects the frustration that you feel in a debate like this, where I cannot believe that we are still on chapter 1. The world is so big, the world is so interesting and vast, and there's so many experiences to have and things to understand and know. But in Nebraska, in many states, we just keep reading chapter 1 over and over and over again. And it's questions like, should people control their own bodies and their own reproductive destiny? Should gay people be able to adopt children? Should immigrants be able to drive? Like all of these basic questions that I'm just, leave people alone, let people live, let people mind their own business. And, that portion of the debate really just reflected the frustration that I have with just debating the same issues over and over and over again.
Well, amen to that. So in your speech, you identified yourself as a rape survivor, and we do have a clip of that.
I am not a person who can say, if you think my 11-year-old should be forced to give birth, that we can still be friends. I don't understand a person who can say something like that. Maybe it's a person who can't give birth. Maybe it's a person who's never been raped. Somebody who doesn't have a clue what it is to go through it.
1 minute.
In life, sometimes we go through things where we have to draw a boundary. It is healthy for me as a mother, as a rape survivor, to draw a boundary and say, if you think that my child should be forced to give birth, you are not my friend.
So it was very brave of you to talk about being a rape survivor. And if it's okay to ask you about that, why did you feel compelled to talk about that as well?
Well, I do have a problem with the idea that people need to sort of perform their trauma in order to have their experiences validated by others, in order to validate the need for change in this country's handling of sexual assault. And we're always asking survivors to peel back their trauma, to perform it again and again and again. And even as we do that as survivors, even as we expose ourselves and make ourselves vulnerable by sharing pain that A, we never should have had to go through, and B, isn't anyone's business, the train continues to roll over us. We get rolled over anyway. But I was frustrated in the debate because this bill had no exceptions for rape or incest. no exceptions for, the life of the mother. It was just a straight abortion ban, period. And, I have an 11-year-old child that I mentioned in the clip. And, if my child were to go through something like I went through, I would have no recourse. They just have to have that baby. That is ridiculous. That is so totalitarian and authoritarian. It has nothing to do with a functioning government. And I think my colleagues just needed to think about the reality of that. In Nebraska, we have a regulation in our Health and Human Services Department that we have to collect data about abortion. And so we actually have a lot of information about why people get abortions in Nebraska, how many people get abortions in Nebraska, what they're, most of them are already parents and are caring for the children they have. We have all this data. And in Nebraska, we do see people as young as 11 getting abortions reported in our report. And there are, in those cases, it's things like rape and incest. And to hear my colleagues say things like, well, it's a very small portion of people, or if that even happens, it's hardly anybody that happens to. And I just be like, bitch, I'm standing right next to you. Like, what do you mean it doesn't happen to anybody? I'm in here. There's only 49 state senators in Nebraska, and one of those people you say doesn't exist and it's not that big of a deal is standing right next to you. So how do you know when you go into the grocery store, when you go to church, when you pick up your kids from school, you're probably running into people like me too. And you don't know that because you have no compassion for the reality that people go through. So I think that part of being a public figure or an elected official or whatever is being vulnerable so that other people are maybe not asked to, who never asked for, who just want to mind their business and live their life. And so, for my colleagues who say that this doesn't happen, that it happens to barely anybody, if I can share and be vulnerable and say, well, that's me that you're talking about, and we're everywhere. And probably the reason you don't know a lot of people is because they don't feel safe telling you, then that's probably a message that they need to receive.
Well, we're grateful for you for being willing to speak out and use your platform to educate. And of course, before you were elected to the Senate, I believe you worked with Planned Parenthood in Nebraska. So that must really inform your work.
Well, I served on the board of the Friends of Planned Parenthood, which is a fundraising board. And I also was one of the founders of an organization to promote sex education, comprehensive sex education in our schools. So I have worked, in proximity to abortion justice and reproductive justice for a long time, though never in like a hired capacity or anything like that.
Well, yes. And again, thank you for sharing that. And I've been active in the Wisconsin Women's Medical Fund, that abortion fund. And sadly, we have seen, of course, what you're saying, these experiences. We've helped children younger than 9 needing to pay for abortion care. 9 and up. So, and most of the people that we help are already mothers, as you have pointed out, who are trying to take care of the family they already have. So, such a vital issue, and we are facing such an assault. So we really appreciate your advocacy.
It's my honor.
So, Mark, did you have another question, or do we want to go to questions?
We'll be taking audience questions probably in a couple minutes. But Senator Hunt, you seem to be continuing in the legacy of former Senator Ernie Chambers and fighting for the least, the last, and the lost. And how did Senator Chambers impact your life? And did his leadership play any role in your willingness to make your dissent from religion known?
No, I've always been, about him playing a role in me sharing that I'm not a person of faith. I've never been a person of faith. So, it wasn't a big deal for me to just be who I am. But Ernie is a legend. He is probably the most important and most effective politician that Nebraska has ever seen. And he's a friend of mine, and he remains, a close mentor and advisor still. what I learned most from Ernie is the importance of understanding the rules. I have another friend who says that most of the problems in the world could be solved if people just did the reading. And this is sort of exactly what Ernie's about too. I think that people who have a lot of privilege in life, whether they're white or male or older or wealthy or cisgender or heterosexual, whatever it is, they think that they belong at every table. They go into the legislature, they get elected to be a state senator or congressperson or whatever, and they feel like they were built for this and born for this, but they don't do the reading. And that's why they're so easy to defeat in debate. So Ernie taught me the importance of knowing the rules, even when they try to change the rules to prevent you from doing some kind of procedural strategy or filibustering or making certain motions that can stop debate. As long as you understand the changes to the rules, you can figure out how to subvert those rules and continue to get your way. So that's the most important thing that I learned from him, is just how to keep the debate going. And I'm not a shy person. I'm good talking. I'm okay on a mic and stuff like that. But he is just a paragon of confidence. And that comes, of course, from 46 years of being in the legislature and leading these charges for justice and for fairness in Nebraska. So watching him do that for so many years gives me so much confidence that I can do it too. I want to share an Ernie story. Like, the most emotional and special thing, I could cry talking about it. The most special thing that ever happened to me in the legislature was in 2019, which is when I was a new senator. We were debating an abortion ban. We were debating an abortion bill, and I was going to lead the debate. I did not have a ton of allies helping me in the debate, and I needed Ernie to help me, and I was talking to him beforehand. I was like, can you take time? Can you make this motion? Asking him to help me with all these things. Well, when it came time for the debate, he was not there. He was in his office the whole time, and he told me he was working on other things. And I was a little bit annoyed. It wasn't too bad, but I just, I was like, where's Ernie? After the debate, which I led, and I led the filibuster, and I talked forever, and I used all the rules and did all the motions. He came up from his office and he put his hands on my shoulders and he looked at me and I said, where were you? And he said, I was watching you the whole time. I need to know that somebody can do that when I'm gone. And that was just the most moving thing anybody's ever said to me, is I need to know that someone can do that when I'm gone.
He was term limited out again.
That's right.
What a champion he is.
Doesn't mean he's not in the legislature anymore.
Right. But so you are following in his footsteps. And I do have a question before we go to audience questions, and that is that everybody's hurting so much. We're licking our wounds. It's been a shocking week, facing reality that Roe versus Wade is going to be overturned by a very ruthless Supreme Court. What solace or what advice or what can you tell viewers who want to do something to protect abortion rights? What's the best thing to do now?
Well, that's a great question. And it's really good that people want to take action. There are so many things that we have to do in addition to voting to change our culture and move the needle more towards justice. And for one thing, the World Health Organization guidance says that people in the first trimester of pregnancy can self-manage a medication abortion without the supervision of a healthcare provider. So I think that we can expect self-managed abortion to grow more prevalent in years to come. And there are a growing number of resources to learn about the research and efficacy of these methods. So we'll see more education around self-managed abortion and legal protections for people who choose this type of care. Another thing is local funds for abortion services and legal defense funds, for example, and those are going to play a greater role in our public health landscape. And this is infrastructure that advocates for abortion justice have been building for decades to protect the right to abortion, even when legislators fail to. I mean, we have to remember that Roe is still the law of the land, that abortion is still legal. But at the same time, all across this country, we have a patchwork of laws about, how abortion is accessible. I mean, in Texas, you can't get it at all now, even though it's legal today. So support your abortion funds. And I want to tell people, if you're concerned, do not reinvent the wheel. Do not roll up, thinking you're going to solve all this yourself. Join the advocates and the people and the workers who have been working on this for decades. Give them your time, your volunteering. If you have money you can donate, that's great. But what we don't need to see after this is 1,000 new little abortion support nonprofits pop up. What we need to see instead is support for the grassroots organizations that have already been doing this work.
Good advice.
Wonderful.
So I can tell you what to do. Ask them. They will tell you what they need.
Very solid advice. And some folks from our audience, obviously, have been very popular today. So Casey Filtz says, do you have any response to Representative Matt Gaetz after he tweeted asking how many of the women who oppose the Supreme Court overturning Roe v. Wade are overeducated, underloving millennials who sadly returned from protests to a lonely microwave dinner with their cats?
Probably a lot of them, but that doesn't mean they don't deserve reproductive health care. I mean, it doesn't matter. It's a ridiculous premise, whether no matter what your income is, no matter what your zip code is, no matter what your race or nationality is, you need reproductive health care. And we can't predict, according to race or income, what somebody's pregnancy outcome is going to be. And so, it's typical for someone like Matt Gaetz to just be mean and edgy on the internet instead of actually having compassion for the reality people have to face.
Fantastic. And how, if you were advising other elected officials on how to talk about this or how to run on this and how to make your values known to voters, what would you say to those, your other compatriots who are running for office in November or earlier in primaries?
Well, there's a lot of media training that you can do around talking about reproductive justice, because when you're talking about something that is so legally under scrutiny, you want to make sure that you say the right thing. So, always speak from a place of honesty. But when you're talking about things like medical procedures and you're speaking about that in the capacity as a leader, you want to make sure you're saying the right thing. So I would check with your local ACLU or abortion clinic or fund or Planned Parenthood or whatever and ask them for guidance on messaging. But all you really need to say is that abortion is a right, that abortion is healthy. And the decision about when and whether to become a parent does not belong to the government. And however we personally feel about abortion, individuals should have the right to make these decisions without political interference because, politicians don't know better than physicians and women and the pregnant people and the families they already have. And the decision does not belong to politicians.
Right. And John Wright asks, if Roe versus Wade is overturned, how long do you think it will be until the religious right begins to move to making it illegal to teach evolution and science at all levels of the public and private education system? And to build on that idea, after this decision comes out, what do you think they're going to attack next?
Well, they're already doing all of that. In every state, you're seeing legislation mandating, I don't know, different, you guys know better than me, like they're bringing all kinds of Christian theocratic ideas into schools, and that's not new, but this really is an opening salvo on a fundamental rollback of rights. Say that, Obergefell is going to be on the line, marriage equality, access to contraception, the Griswold case. But none of this is a surprise. Nobody should be surprised that this is happening. They should join the people who have already been organizing to stop this and give them strength in numbers, in funds, in voice, in platform, and lend your platform and your voice to the people who have been doing this work. But don't be surprised. Of course, they're coming for everything. They already were. It's not what's next. It's all happening now.
Well, and I have to say that Trump appointed a third of our federal judiciary, and at the lower level, we are hurting. I mean, there has been 2 decades since we've enlarged the number of district judges and appeals court judges, and it would be so easy to rebalance this by having more justices, more judges appointed, to enlarging even just the lower federal judiciary would be such a common sense thing to do. And of course, we want to see expansion. I want to see expansion on the Supreme Court, because I don't think we can live like this. We can't have two more generations with this particular Supreme Court taking away all our rights.
Mm-hmm.
That's my little grievance.
Yeah, I hear you. I don't have a position on this right now. I can really see both sides of like, okay, well, then we get into every time there's a Republican supermajority, we add 4 more seats, and then we get a Democratic supermajority, we add 5 more seats, and it becomes even more of a farce than it already is, more politicized than it already is. This won't happen, but what I would like to see is accountability for our court justices that we have now. Like, who paid all of Brett Kavanaugh's debt off? Mm-hmm. Why did Amy Coney Barrett sign that letter saying she would overturn Roe v. Wade or whatever it said? Why is Clarence Thomas's wife Ginny doing all that bullshit with the January 6th insurrection? Like, can we please investigate the judges we have instead of treating them like the gods up on a pedestal that are untouchable? And it's like the Pope. It's like the infallible word of God. The Supreme Court justices are not the infallible word of the law. They're political people who are appointed for life to political positions. So maybe we need to look at reforms around term limits for the court. Maybe we need to look at more accountability for when justices have ethical breaches. But I'm open to anything. I'm open-minded about reforms.
Wonderful. Yeah, and we are starting to see a lot of activity in Congress, whether it's the 21st Century Courts Act and other proposals. So we have seen more excitement from certain members, and hopefully those bills will start getting more traction as time moves on. And again, just as it is so abundantly clear of the need for reform. And I guess the last question I always like to ask you is, how do you explain all of this to your daughter, and how do you explain this to your child of the world she's inheriting and what is happening and whatnot? And how do you explain this to kids?
I think that kids are smart. I think that they understand what's going on. They're very media savvy. They talk about these things in school with their friends. I think that there's a lot less stigma around things like reproductive health care, around abortion, around LGBTQ issues, around religious diversity. When I went to school, it was not a very diverse place. It was very homogenous in terms of race and religion and income and all of those things. And a lot of kids today, they just aren't living that way. I think they can accept the truth if you just tell them how it is. And if you can do it in like an age appropriate way, answer their questions. Don't assume that they're not smart enough to understand something. And if you don't know the answer to something, that's a great opportunity for you to learn together. And that's something that my kid and I do all the time.
Fantastic. Well, that concludes Ask an Atheist for this week. Thank you for joining us, Senator Hunt, and for your leadership, your wisdom, and we are grateful for everything you are doing out there. It's wonderful to see you, as always. I know we all know this is very trying circumstances, but just being able to talk with you certainly is helpful, informative, educational, and feels a little better.
Thank you. I want to thank you especially for recognizing what's happening in Nebraska. It's very frustrating to advocates and organizers and people who have been doing this work for so long when people brush aside the South or brush aside the Midwest and say, we can't help them, we can't save them, there's nothing to do, or have these stereotypes about what it's like to live here. I'm a proud Nebraskan. I am sticking around here to help the people who need us. And those people exist in every state, even red states, especially in red states. So thank you for recognizing what we're doing here.
Well, thank you. And hey, we're in Wisconsin. We're kind of in the same boat. We're not a flyover state, truly. And we're looking forward to meeting you, Senator Hunt, at our national convention in San Antonio in October. And viewers can find out more at our website. You can go to ffrf.org/convo-2022, or just look for the events and outreach link. And